Johnson, you're enrolled.
Really? Thank you.
We very much appreciate your joining us, gentlemen. As you heard on the last panel, we will have 5-minute opening statements to leave us the maximum amount of time for questioning, and I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. John DeCamp, who is sitting with Mr. Trockman and Mr. Fletcher as counsel. You're welcome, sir. We'll begin with the listing in the witness list as circulated with Mr. John Trockman from Knoxon, Montana. Mr. Trockman, the floor is yours.
Greetings from Montana. It is sad that this opportunity to address the Senate has arisen out of the Oklahoma tragedy. We wholeheartedly denounce the deplorable act of violence. We have and will continue to assist in any manner to apprehend all persons that may have planned and or carried out that dastardly deed at whatever level they may hide. At the present time, we view the militia movement as a giant neighborhood watch. The movement is made up of a cross-section of Americans from all walks of life with a singular mandate which is public and overt: the return to the Constitution of the United States and 2-year oath to defend that Constitution. The Declaration of Independence gives excellent insight as to why people feel the need to group together and participate in militia patriot organizations. This document speaks for itself once again, as it did over 200 years ago, when flagrant injustice continues out of control by oppressive public servants. We request that this document be entered into the permanent record as a partial support document to our statements. The following are just a few examples as to why Americans are becoming more and more involved in militia patriot organizations. The high office of the presidency has been turned into a position of dictatorial oppression through the abusive use of executive orders and directives, thus leaving Congress stripped of its authority. When the president overrules Congress by executive order, representative government fails. When government defines human beings as a biological resource under the United Nations Ecosystem Management Program, maintaining that state and local laws are barriers to the goals of federal government. When the average citizen must work for half of each year just to pay their taxes, while billions of our tax dollars are forcibly sent to bail out the banking elite. While our fellow Americans are homeless, starving, and without jobs, Congress wonders why the constituents get upset. When government allows our military to be ordered and controlled by foreigners under presidential order, allowing foreign armies to train on our soil, allowing our military to label caring patriots as the enemy, then turns their tanks loose on U.S. citizens to murder and destroy, or directs a sniper to shoot a mother in the face while holding her infant in her arms, you bet your constituents get upset. When government refuses to hold hearings on government-sanctioned abuses and whitewashes those hearings that are held, when government tampers with or destroys evidence needed to solve crime and now considers the very idea of infringing upon the people's right of freedom of speech, assembly, and the right to redress after having destroyed the 2nd and 4th articles, how can senators and representatives ever question the loyalty of concerned Americans without first cleaning their own house? Quote, the law perverted and the police powers of the state perverted along with it. The law not only turns from its proper purpose, but made to follow a totally contrary purpose. The law becomes the weapon of every kind of greed. Instead of checking crime, the law itself becomes guilty of the evils it's supposed to pursue. Unquote. Frenchman Frederick Bastiat, 1884. We the people have about had all we can stand of the twisted, slanted, biased media of America, who take their signals from a few private, covert, special interest groups bent on destroying what's left of the American way. We respectfully request that you rely upon your own investigation, steering clear of the media and their rumor gossip mills of disinformation. Although most everyone in the movement has assembled under the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of peaceably assemble, We have not forgotten what our founding fathers have stated about the second. Former President James Madison, a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. Former Vice President Elginbridge Gary. I ask, what is the purpose of the militia? To offset the need of large standing armies, the bane of liberty. Why would he call the armed forces the bane of liberty? Who is the Pentagon waging activities against active campaigns to win over the populace, and why? Why does Military Civil Affairs Manual 4110 seem to be so applicable in America today? Paraphrasing, steps necessary for the overthrow of a nation. May God be with America as he watches over the shoulders of you who write her laws. A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. America has nothing to fear from patriots maintaining vigilance. She should, however, fear those that would outlaw vigilance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crockett. Now, Mr. Fletcher.
Well, I'm going to just stand for the, in the interest of time so that we can get into some other more pressing concerns. I'm not going to give any type of an introductory comment at this point in time, other than to point out that what we must look at is the overriding important point being what is the concern of the actually several million American citizens that are involved with patriot groups. And those concerns basically is an out-of-control government, an overly oppressive government, a government that utilizes a secret shadow means by which most of you or some of you that are not even involved with it have no idea what money is being spent for in our black covert funding. So we'll kind of get into that. I want to skip and pass my time on.
Well, Mr. Fletcher, perhaps your time might be used to specify some of the comments which you made this morning on Good Morning America, ABC, if you would, about a second bomb being planted at Oklahoma City, or evidence of a second assailant, second conspiracy.
Yes, typically what I might do, again, is a matter of, so we can cover enough things that will also be important. This is a report that's been put together by a couple of people. One of them is an former FBI agent, formerly with a $22 million budget and 700 people working under him. Had been with the FBI for some probably 25 years. His determination, along with many experts, is that there was a minimum of at least one, if not two more explosions simultaneously within the building. Additionally, we have information that John Doe number 2 has been located. He has a name, we know who he is, where he is, and that he is also of a foreign descent. And for some reason, the FBI is steering away from this gentleman. That needs to be looked into more definitively, and I would offer this report, which I will leave with you folks. This also covers the type of bomb that most likely was utilized inside the building. The idea that it was a huge fertilizer bomb, there was no residue to speak of, no caustic fumes, which automatically would come from that bomb if it was singularly placed. Additionally, the idea, according to experts, is the idea of that bomb directively destroying the building as it did is absolute baloney. So I'll just leave this, and then we can get into, again, the answers and questions relative to other events of government corruption and being out of control. I do want to leave as much time as we can on that, which includes the militarization of local police offices all over the United States, including the supplying of armored personnel vehicles all over America to smaller police stations, which is ridiculous. I'd like to pass my time.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Adams.
I'd like to thank the body here today for inviting us. I think this is a very important time in history that this body has brought the militia to speak here today. I think it's important that we have the opportunity to talk to one another, to air our views, and to get to know one another. And I hope that the individual states of the militias across the country will also do the same thing with the leaders in their states. As I sat here this morning and heard the testimony, and I certainly cannot address each piece individually, the things that I heard, at least a dozen different charges from across the nation of lawlessness, are certainly disturbing not only to me but to most militia members. and we are certainly totally against violence. What I do want people to understand through these hearings today is what is the militia today and who are the people that are involved in the militia. I think what we heard today so far in testimony have been very, very, very extreme elements, and in most cases were individuals that were not directly associated with what we would call the mainstream militia movement today. And that's what I would like to address, is who that mainstream militia is. It is a cross-section of Americans, of every type of occupation that there is, everything from attorneys to doctors, to mechanics, to nurses, to businessmen of all types. They are everyday Americans that are very, very concerned with what's going on in their country. And we applaud that. We are excited that once again in this nation, people are getting involved in their government. We are setting up programs right now to help people start registering to vote and going to the polls and getting involved in the legislation, in the process that we all love. The militias, as many times has been reported in the media, that they hate their government. This is not so. We think that our government, that this body is the finest form of government in the world, and it could not be better. Are there problems in government? Certainly there's problems. You can hardly find an American that doesn't have something to complain about. Your body itself, whether you're Republican or Democrat, is complaining about the other side. That's America. That's good and that's healthy. And we believe in the freedom of speech. We do not believe in hatred. We do not believe in racism. And if you'll look over very, very carefully of all of the things that you've heard me say in the media and some of the others that have said in the media, we have said nothing about hate. We have said nothing about racism. We have not been anti-Semitic. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't fringe elements out there, and I'm not saying that over the last 14 months, when this organization, this group that is growing across the country, has started getting public attention because we have been out in the open, because we have been very public. We have gotten a lot of media. I'm not going to say that others aren't going to try to attach themselves to our coattails and take that ride and try to get their public attention too, but it is wrong. If they use hate, if they use violence, if they do not abide the law, we will be the first to expose them. We will be the first, if they are breaking the law, to turn them over to the law enforcement agencies. In my state, if you'll check the record, you'll find that we have stood behind our law enforcement fully. We have also initiated legislation in our state to support and empower our sheriffs and other law officials. We are law-abiding, God-fearing Americans. And we ask that this Congress will recognize that we represent literally millions of people in this country that are once again getting involved. And the one thing that they see, the one reason that this movement has grown so rapidly over the last 14 months is because the people do see a voice for them in the militia. And we're excited to be that voice, and we want to be an honest voice and an open voice. And there's some fears out there in the country. You've heard about some of the fears this morning. Whether the fear has substance to it or not, it's still a fear, and it needs to be addressed. All fears need to be addressed, and expose those fears. If they're real, then let's work on them. If they're not real, then let's expose them for what they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Johnson.
Hi, how you guys doing? Senators? One of the things I wanted to bring up, first let me tell you who I am. Name's James Johnson, co-founder of a group called E Pluribus Unum, and one of the leaders and spokesperson for the Ohio Unorganized Militia. I've spoken to many groups around Ohio and in other states, and I've also helped start some groups. Now, what I wanted to touch on was what Mr. Thompson said. I think he focused on a key point, which was why these groups are forming. Why is it growing like it is? And that's some of the topics that need to be addressed, and I think maybe you can talk to some people on the inside like you have here to answer those questions. To put it to you bluntly, some of the legislation that's coming out of Washington, some of the executive actions that are taking place, ladies and gentlemen, these things started a revolution 200 years ago and got this country started. And the people are seeing this. The national news media and the actions of this government is some of the best recruitment we could have. We don't have to say much. All you have to do is talk to the average person out there to tell you, how do you feel about your government? And the people you look at here, we're the calm ones. We're the ones that calm people down. Now, I'm speaking here as a representative for my state and other groups that I know of. The animosity that I see out there between the citizens, all of them, and the government is frightening. What they did was, after listening to all these abuses and government atrocities that you're going to hear here today, and they saw that they were going to no avail, they decided to see what they could do to become part of the solution. They looked into the law, and under Title 10 U.S.C. 311, saw a phenomenon known as the unorganized militia that consists of all people, even the people taking these pictures right here, everyone. And they began to form themselves in units for their own self-defense and their self-preservation. Now, the way we stand now, and it's good that we're getting these views aired out, because 200 years ago, the British didn't get the hint until they saw dead redcoats out there. But this time, maybe we can get this out in the open and have things resolved. Because I feel, and it's concerning to me, and I'm being sincerely honest, that with the increasing polarization between the tax-paying public out here and what goes on, not only in here, but certain state governments, that the only thing standing between some of the current legislation being contemplated and armed conflict is time. It's one of the reasons I got in this movement, to help prevent that. Now, you can see from the last 2 years of sales from the firearms producers in this country, this nation is probably one of the most heavily armed forces on earth. And I have heard more and more people say, if one of these black-suited, armor-wearing, state-sponsored terrorists come kicking down my door, I'm going to blow somebody away. They don't call themselves militia. They don't even call themselves patriots. They call themselves American citizens who are getting tired of confiscatory tax rates, increasingly heavy regulations, which is, they believe, are leading them down a path to involuntary servitude. And one of the slogans that's been going around, especially in Ohio, is what I've been telling people, for those who think that this is just primarily an angry white male movement, is that if our ancestors would have been armed, they would not have been slaves. That's why people are beginning armed. Not so much with firepower. That's not the thing that makes it dangerous. What makes it dangerous is that they're being armed with knowledge. What you're going to see is a growing number of citizens, and you're seeing that now, that's why we're here, move away from the authority that is here in the Beltway and begin to create their own constitutional authority. You're going to begin to see this in the resurgence of the common law courts. You're going to begin to see this, and I'm going to summarize here, in the formation of the militias. That's what came first, to defend ourselves. But you're also going to see this on the legislative end. You're going to see your own candidates in our own elections, and hopefully that we can become a system which will attract others into a more constitutional-based system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Olson.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The following statement will attempt to answer the question of the legitimacy and the need of the citizen militia. Not only does the Constitution specifically allow the formation of a federal army, it also recognizes the inherent right of the people to form militia. Further, it recognizes that the citizen and his personal armament are the foundation of the militia. The arming of the militia is not left to the state, but to the citizen. However, should the state choose to arm its citizen militia, it is free to do so, bearing in mind that the Constitution is not a document limiting the citizen, but rather limiting the power of government. But should the state fail to arm its citizen militia, the right of the people to keep and bear arms becomes the source of the guarantee that the state will not be found defenseless in the presence of a threat to its security. It makes no sense whatsoever to look to the Constitution of the United States or that of any state for permission to form a citizen militia, since logically the power to permit is also the power to deny. If brought to its logical conclusion in this case, government may deny the citizen the right to form a militia. If this were to happen, the state would assert itself as the principal of the contract, making the people the agents. Liberty then would depend on the state's grant of liberty. Such a concept is foreign to American thought. While the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution recognizes the existence of the state militia and recognizes their necessity for securing a free state, and while it also recognizes that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, the Second Amendment is not the source of the right to form a militia nor to keep and bear arms. Those rights existed in the states prior to the formation of the Federal Union. In fact, the right to form militia and to keep and bear arms exists from antiquity. The enumeration of those rights rights in the Constitution only underscores their natural occurrence and importance. According to the 10th Amendment, ultimate power over the militia is not delegated to the federal government by the Constitution. Consequently, the power of the militia remains in the hands of the people. Again, the fundamental function of the militia in society remains with the people. Therefore, the Second Amendment recognizes that the militia's existence and the security of the state rests ultimately in the people, who volunteer their persons to constitute the militia and their arms to supply its firepower. The primary defense of the state rests with the citizen militia bearing its own arms. Fundamentally, it is not the state that defends the people, but the people who defend the state. The second line of defense of the state consists of a statutory organization known as the National Guard. Whereas the National Guard is solely the creation of statutory law, the militia derives its existence from the inherent inalienable rights which existed before the Constitution and whose importance are such that they merit specific recognition in that document. While the National Guard came into existence as the result of legislative activity, the militia existed before there was a nation or a constitutional form of government. The militia, consisting of people owning and bearing personal weapons, is the very authority out of which the United States Constitution grew. This point must be emphasized. Neither the citizen's militia nor the citizen's private arsenal can be an appropriate subject of federal regulation. It was the armed militia of the American colonies whose own efforts ultimately led to the establishment of the United States of America. While some may say that the right to keep and bear arms is granted to Americans by the Constitution, just the opposite is true. The federal government itself is the child of the armed citizen. We, the people, are the parent of the child we call government. You, senators, are part of the child that we, the people, gave life to. The increasing amount of federal encroachment into our lives indicates the need for parental corrective action. In short, the federal government needs a good spanking to make it behave. One other important point needs to be made. Since the Constitution is the limiting document upon the government cannot become greater than the granting power. The servant cannot become greater than its master. Therefore, should the chief executive or other branch of government or all branches together act to suspend the Constitution under a rule of martial law, all power granted to government would be canceled and deferred back to the granting power, that is the people. And I'll conclude with this statement: martial law shall not be possible in this country as long as the people recognize the Bill of Rights as inalienable. My statement is not complete, however, it has been made part of the record for those who would like to review it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. Mr. Olson, I heard you say on national television that you could understand why someone would bomb the Oklahoma City Federal Building. How can you say that? How can you understand why someone would bomb a building and kill so many innocent men, women, and children?
I don't believe that's the correct context, Senator Specter. I believe the context was, when they were asking me about the dynamic that occurred during following the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building, I was asked by Leslie Stahl, and I responded that I understand what took place. The good senator from Montana here earlier said that he understood why people hate their government. I don't think it's uncommon for us to seek understanding, because unless we understand a problem, we have no way of solving it. What I meant by that, and in the context, and you, Senator Specter, who sound-bited Leslie Stahl, and were wrong to do so, sir, you should have got the entire... Would you please allow me to finish my statement, sir? You should have received the whole context and allowed me to explain it. What I said was that I understand the dynamic of retribution. Revenge and retribution are a natural dynamic which occurs when justice is taken out of the equation. Back in the Old Testament, there were the cities of refuge. You who are students of the Old Testament know that those cities of refuge were placed in the Promised Land to allow a place for a person to run if someone's life were taken, that a relative would not avenge the life of that one. That awaiting justice. When justice is removed from the equation, then the dynamic of revenge, retribution, and retaliation will take place. I understand the dynamic, sir. That is what I meant.
Well, all right, Mr. Wilson, let's not deal in sound bites. Do you now understand why someone bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Building?
The Oklahoma Federal Building, I would give that information to the FBI. I understand the dynamic, sir. It is up to you to do the investigation, and I feel that the FBI, for some reason, has taken 7 to 8 weeks to find someone who is not guilty. I think it's about time that they start looking for the ones who are guilty.
Now, we'll pursue parts of that later, but I'm not asking you for evidence as to who bombed it. When you say you tell the FBI, I want to know if you understand why somebody bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Building.
It has not been proven that somebody bombed the Oklahoma Federal Building. The fact of the matter is that one person has been taken into custody. There have been allegations made. He is an alleged bomber. I believe that we in the United States of America have to wait until the justice system takes its course. We are innocent until proven guilty. I don't know why somebody bombed. I'm saying that if someone were to be held accountable for that, and if that was the act of retaliation, revenge, or retribution, I understand the dynamics, sir, of that, because justice has been taken out of the equation. And when justice is taken out of the equation, revenge, retaliation, and retribution will take its course.
Well, whether it's singular or plural, the Oklahoma City Federal Building was bombed.
What are you looking for, Senator?
What am I looking for? Well, I hadn't finished my question, but I'll answer yours. What I'm looking for is your statement about understanding why the building was bombed, whether it's singular or plural. And you talk about vengeance, and you talk about retribution, and you talk about many factors, but what I want to understand from you is whether you understand, or stated differently, think there's any justification whatsoever, given your comments on vengeance and retribution, whether there's any justification whatsoever for the bombing of the Oklahoma City Federal Building.
Well, you're a clever attorney, sir, and I give you credit for trying to wrap my thoughts around your axle, but I'm not going to allow you to do that. Sir, it has not been proven that that person did that, nor has it been proven that that was in fact an act of retaliation, retribution, or revenge. We still have to wait the ongoing investigation. It very well may be that there was a conspiracy at higher levels, people behind those people who we have been fed by the press to accept or to believe that perhaps it was one angry individual. I say wait, let's do the investigation. Let's wait. 3 days after John F. Kennedy was killed, everybody believed that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. Today, many of us doubt that he alone did it. And you're the single bullet theorist, and you believe that he alone did it. We don't necessarily hold to that opinion, sir.
Well, if we can leave the single bullet theory for another day.
That's your choice.
No, I will stay and discuss the single bullet theory with you when the hearings are concluded. I'll be glad to do that on the record and in public. And I'm not trying to put any words in your mouth. I'm just asking a direct question. And I'm trying to understand what you understand. I cannot understand how anybody could understand why someone would bomb the Oklahoma City Federal Building as a matter of retribution.
Well, you don't understand the problem that we've had in Northern Ireland. You don't understand the problem that we've had in South Africa. You do not understand the hatred and the retaliation, the retribution and the revenge that has been going on around this globe since time immemorial. Then you don't understand the dynamics, sir.
Well, Mr. Olson, I may not understand, and that's why we've had these hearings, so that you could have a full opportunity to express yourself.
May I make a correction for the record, too? Senator Cole raised a poster a moment ago showing Hitler with his hand raised in the air. So that's a copyrighted poster produced by Jews for the Preservation of Firearm Ownership. It is not the work of some militia organization. So just to make that a comment for the record.
Well, we'll pick up your comment about copyrights and about Jews in a few minutes.
No, sir, I believe you're trying to lay at the feet. You're trying to lay at the feet of the militia some culpability as a responsibility. You're trying to make us out to be something that we are not, much like the press has tried to do over this last year. We are not what you think we are. We are not what the press wants to feed to the American people. We are people who are opposed to racism and hatred. We are people who love our government and love the Constitution. There's been the design and the blueprint for governments around this world. We're proud of the United States of America. But the thing that we stand against is corruption. We stand against oppression and tyranny in government. And many of us, are coming to the conclusion that you best represent that corruption and tyranny. There are millions, 40 to 70 million Americans out there on the other side of the Alleghenies, and there is intelligent life west of the Alleghenies, sir. And I believe that you have to talk to those people out there. You're wasting precious time.
Well, I'm not going to interrupt you in any of your responses.
I'm not going to go on preaching, sir. Go ahead.
But I am going to note you're interrupting me when I started to say to you that we will get back to your statement about copyright and about Jews. We'll get back to that. But what I want to come back to at this moment is your statement about retribution and violence and apparent justification for it. And
yes,
now, wait a minute. I'm not going to let you interrupt me again. What I want to come to, and I want to have a full discussion with you, Mr. Olson, because I want your ideas fully exposed.
There are other people on this panel, sir, that
well, I know, but I'm the
share
chairman,
this.
and they'll have a chance to speak, and I'm not going to interrupt you at all whenever you start to reply. And what I want to do is I want to hear all your ideas, because I want your ideas compared to mine. And I want to let the American public judge whether you're right or I'm right. And when you talk about Ireland and you talk about South Africa and you talk about Oklahoma City, we're going to give you every opportunity to say everything you have in mind. And then I'm going to say a few things, and we're going to let the public judge. And I don't take lightly your comment to me that I represent corruption. I don't take that lightly at all.
Well, let me say it again.
And I want you to prove it if you're going to say that. And now the floor is yours.
I appreciate that, and I would like to correct Carl Levin also. He made some allegations and some statements that were absolutely fallacious. They are not true, and I believe that anyone who has the record of Carl Levin's statements earlier would like to talk to us. We would like to correct those for the record.
Proceed.
There are many statements concerning the Fowlerville people. The Fowlerville people were not part of the Michigan Militia Corps. Just about every fact that he brought forth, he did not name places or times or dates or the context of those investigations. He, together with many of these people seated and also the press before us, these people and you have tried to paint us in a different light. Following the Oklahoma City bombing, Louis Freeh, on the 27th of April, came out and said that the Michigan Militia Corps had nothing to do with the bombing in Oklahoma City. However, the press did not pick up on that. When you talk about, or when the senators talk about, or Carl Levin talks about how terrible it would be to even consider that the federal government had anything to do with killing Americans, I submit to you, sir, that the Central Intelligence Agency has been in the business of killing Americans and killing people in the United States and around the world since the 1946. I submit to you, sir, that the Central Intelligence Agency is probably the grandest conspirator behind all of this government. And I submit to you, sir, that perhaps the puppeteer strings of the Central Intelligence Agency reach even into the senators, perhaps before us and perhaps also in the Senate of the United States of America.
Well, as long as you say perhaps, Mr. Olson. Senator Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to read to you, Mr. Olson, a fax that you sent out on April 28th to the American people, and it said this: "The wrath of the country has been directed toward the brave men and women of the Michigan militia. Now, here's the truth. On April 19th, 1995, a day that will live in infamy, the government of Japan, in retaliation for the United States gas attack on the subway in Japan, blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City." That's the fax from you to the American people on April 28th, 1995. Would you care to comment on it?
I have a 40-page document that I have prepared, a transcript of an audio tape that is available to the press. We encourage the press to see me at the press conference this afternoon at 3 o'clock in the White Room on the 13th floor of the National Press Club building, and I will be happy to provide you with 40 pages of transcript. Do your own investigation.
Well, are you standing by that fax?
I'm saying that bits and pieces of information are conveyed and brought to the attention of the Michigan Militia Corps. We have established safe houses. We have established places of protection where people inside the agencies can come to us with information concerning corruption. And when they do, we take, sir, let me follow.
You haven't said it yet.
I'll be very brief. When they bring facts to us, we hand it over to the media to investigate. We do not have the resources or the wherewithal to investigate all of these facts.
You haven't responded. I said to you, you responded to the fax that you sent out on April 28th. It says, on April 19th, a day that will live in infamy, the government of Japan, in retaliation for the United States gas attack on the subway in Japan, blew up the federal building in Oklahoma City. Your
And
fact.
I reply to you, sir, that if we wait and the investigation is done, I believe that we will find collusion between governments in the involvement in the Oklahoma City bombing, if we will wait and allow the investigations to be conducted.
All right. Mr. Fletcher, as I mentioned in my statement, the militia of Montana claims that there are, quote, lesbians, sex perverts, child molester advocates, Christian haters, and the most doctrinaire of communists heading the FBI and the IRS. Now, Mr. Fletcher, with respect to the IRS, I have no quarrel with you.
So be it, sir.
But my friend Louis Freeh is a different matter. So I would like to ask you, are you suggesting that he is a lesbian or a sex pervert, a child molester advocate, or a Christian hater, or a communist?
Well, first off, that's not my quote, so that for the record we clear that. And I think that comes out of a singular book that we carry, the same as the library carries, and that's the extent of that. Now, those people that live inside the Beltway have to select their own friends and figure out what their sexual status is, and there's a huge variety at the highest levels of this government in that direction. What I would like to point out, though, that you bring up Mr. Freeh, and an interesting thing has taken place. Actually, almost a year ago, July the 2nd, Mr. Freeh was in Poland, and he made a Nazi-related speech, and it was a memorial to the Jewish camps and the Holocaustic action that took place there. And he said an interesting statement. He said that what happened 50 years ago is not just a history as much as it is a warning. And Mr. Freeh said that, in fact, at any time that any nation of the world starts to utilize local police with their federal enforcement and starts to federally arm the police at a local level, as Adolf Hitler did as he slowly came in and did his outrageous acts back in 1940 and 38, he said that anytime we see this, it's an immediate red flag that that nation is probably moving into a dictatorship. Well, within a single year, we start supplying local police agencies with armored personnel carriers. This, by the way, is just the sheriff's department. Those are not military. This is the sheriff's department in Everett, Washington. These armored personnel vehicles are being supplied by federal enforcing agents to a whole variety of local police agencies. This is exactly part of what Mr. Freeh was telling the folks in Poland and the rest of the world to be aware of as a sign of moving in a dictatorship. This is only one small part of that, sir. This is what I would refer to as a terrorist. These are FBI enforcing agents dressed in their black outfits. This, sir, is an ATF agent in its black outfits. This used to be a terrorist. If an American saw this character going down the street, any American, 10, 15 years ago, they would have shot this sucker because this is a picture of a terrorist. This is now the ATF agents. We have questions relative to going beyond Mr. Freeh's point of hundreds of flat cars of United Nations Russian equipment all over the United States. We have questions as to why the United States Army, with this document I have here, has put together the regulations to create civilian inmate labor prison camps inside military bases. Those are the questions. We have questions why, under executive orders, the President of the United States sends $200 million to build Russian homes for Russian soldiers overseas.
Thank you. I'd like to just get on to Mr.
Yes.
Fletcher. Another question in an interview with the Los Angeles Times on April 21st, you said that you told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilized it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to
questions. Yes, but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the Senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Cole. Senator Feinstein?
He's not here.
Pardon me, Senator Thompson?
Mr. Johnson, whether or not one agrees with your statement, I think you gave a very thoughtful statement, thought-provoking as to what you perceive to be going on in the country and the concerns. You mentioned the problems, as you said, with our government. You talk about the tax rates being too high. You talk about government being too big, too intrusive, and all those things, many of which many of us are also concerned about and are trying to do something about it. You talked about the British, our revolution, other places around the world. But, you know, we couldn't vote King George out of office. The difference between us and other countries is that we do have a democratic society, and one in which huge numbers of people don't even bother to vote. But we have an opportunity to change just about all the things that you listed that's a problem. I take it that you think that our system is broken down, our electoral process in some way is broken down. Either it's really not free and open, or maybe we shouldn't go by democratic processes, or what's your problem with working through the process to solve these problems?
You know, there was an organization, I believe, came out back in September and said that the militia's aim was clearly the democratic process itself. And my response to that was that our aim was, our target was right on target, right around November the 8th, when a whole new Congress came in here. Fine, granted. Now, we advocate that more than everything, voting. But we seem to have a problem here during these campaigns when all of these wonderful politicians, God love them, say whatever they're going to say, and they get inside the Beltway and everything is, how do we say, politics as usual. Now, what's going on as this trend continues, and you guys got to listen to this, you're pushing people's backs against the wall out there. We got people out there hungry, like you're talking about, people out there starving, and people tired of getting terrorized by law enforcement. Well, I shouldn't say law enforcement. I will support law enforcement whenever they support the law. I'll just call them enforcement. They're getting outright economically terrorized, socially terrorized. I mean, the political correctness is getting out of hand. That is why these people are, what they're doing, what this militia is now, it's a mindset. It's the civil rights movement of the 90s. It's people sitting there with "Don't tread on me" stamped across their forehead. There's people drawing the line in their sand. That's what it is. Nobody's going to go out there and shoot things. Nobody's going to go out there and blow up things. We're not baby killers. We're baby boomers. We're not terrorists. We're taxpayers. We're not extremists. We're just extremely ticked off at the way the government is deviating away from what's going on around here. And when I say we, as this militia, as this little covert group out there, no, it's everybody. Now, just because you say we're going to form ourselves a militia, it doesn't make you the militia. What we stand for here is the Constitution. That's it.
All right, let me follow up on that a little
We'll
bit.
be disregarding the lights. Senator Thompson may proceed as he wishes.
Thank you. I take it then basically you think the system doesn't work, that the problems that you see are not really being addressed, that politicians promise one thing and deliver another. You're not the first one to come up with that idea, I assure you.
It's becoming a real general consensus around the country, sir.
And you basically believe that today that exists the way it always has.
What exists?
That situation exists.
No, I didn't say it always has. But today it is becoming more and more evident that it is existing.
I see. What do you see the role of the militia in addressing that problem?
Right now, the militia, I look at it as a constitutional safety net. What you have are these groups who are organizing themselves in a manner that the Constitution will be preserved, no matter what kind of action this government or any other government takes. That's the little friction point you're going to run into there.
Well, that gets into another question, I suppose. Bad laws are one thing, high taxes and that sort of thing. But when you talk about a militia, you don't organize a militia to lower taxes, I assume. You organize a militia that at least has some military capability. Is there concern that the government is forcefully and physically going to move against individuals who are trying to assert their constitutional rights?
You bet.
Is that the basis of the militia movement?
That is not the basis of the militia movement, but that is a concern right now.
Would you elaborate on that?
Sure. One of the things that was mentioned here earlier, I think Senator Specter mentioned it. He said, were the militias a threat to the federal government? And I says, gee, you walk outside of 495 and the question's the other way around. Is the government a threat to the militia? The militia is everybody. It's just a law in which people form themselves a group to self-defense and for their security. Okay? It's not to wage war, but if a war is waged, these groups plan on winning. And let me tell you something else. Speaking of this, you're saying, should this be looked into? It's a mindset. I was at a gun range earlier this year, and they happened to be firing machine guns that they owned lawfully. And we have people, I'm talking law enforcement, I'm talking military, we have a lot of sympathetic people in those branches who all were down there with their firearms and with the awesome display of firepower that I saw down there, and that was just one iota of it. Okay? I say this sincerely, I don't mean to direct this at anybody here, but a lot of people see what's coming down. They see some of the executive orders that are being thrown at them, some of the statements that are being made directed toward the American public.
What form do you think is most likely for this warfare to be launched against the people?
In what form?
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned instances, obviously, where that you're very much concerned about, the Waco incident and things of that nature, but do you see something on a more organized basis or a more pervasive basis in terms of what the government might do to the citizens?
Right. It isn't just about Waco and Ruby Ridge. When you hear things about, there was a survey out in 29 Palms, California, in which military officers were asked, if necessary, would they shoot on Americans who refuse to give up their firearms. In any other country, that constitutes a serious threat. Military is not to be used with law enforcement. And there are certain inalienable rights people just aren't going to give up. This is the problem we face here. Even if you say, hey, this is a real bad idea, these guys are a bad idea, and we ought to go just stomp their heads in, you got a problem because they're going to shoot back. And I can tell when those other officers were up here, it was a serious concern. Even though, hey, we all want to preserve our constitutional rights, okay? If there's nuts out there, heck, we'll probably find them before you do and turn them over to you. But as far as the mainstream approach of this thing, and when we hear about some of the plans or ideas that they would like to see happen to us, okay, now I have seen them take place. For instance, I'm talking about Brunswick, Ohio. We had one gentleman who got his door knocked on. He said, no, go back and get a warrant. It's under the Constitution. Get a warrant, get probable cause. Okay, the result was he kicked his door in 7 times. So this person with a legally owned weapon shot him. She said it was a police officer. If a police officer kicks down my door with no warrant, no probable cause, what am I supposed to do?
Incidents like that have happened throughout the course of history. Will continue to happen.
The result.
My question is: do you perceive and are you concerned about a more organized more pervasive effort by the government against individuals or groups or whoever, in what form it might take. Could I ask Mr. Adams that question, or maybe somebody else?
Yeah, I would like to respond to a few of these things. I don't know that I necessarily perceive that the government is planning some conspiracy, if you will, to attack the militias. I do have a question and would like a response. I know you may not be able to respond to me today. This goes back to March 25th of this year, and I know that some of you senators are aware at least of the allegations, and that's what I'd like to know, if they were allegations or if they were true, because this is the answer to your question. There was a proposed or an allegation that the Attorney General, Janet Reno, was going to attack several militia leaders in this country on March 25th. There were several senators that wrote to the Attorney General concerning this and asked her not to do this. My question is, I don't know if it was going to take place or not. If it was going to
do what, Mr. Adams?
To attack several militia leaders.
You mean arrest?
Attack was the word. Attack, yes. And I'm not saying that this was going to take place. I'm saying that I've seen the letters that the senators have written to her. I've seen copies of them. They've been on television.
Do you have those copies with you?
I do not know.
Would you provide them to us?
I will provide where you can get them. I do not personally have them, but I will do that. They do have them.
Those, and we will.
Do you have them with you?
No, sir, we don't.
So the question is, I don't know if that was real or whether it was rumor or what, but I will say that it was a tremendous concern to a lot of people across the country.
That they were going to be attacked.
That they were going to be attacked, right. Now, I personally could not believe that it could be possible in this country, because we were violating no laws. As I mentioned earlier, we operate within the law, and we believe in that. So if we were going to be attacked, it was certainly something very, very ominous to take place from our government. But it was widespread enough that some Congress representatives did inquire of Ms. Reno about this, and
she did not respond.
She did not respond. We would like a response. If it was real, then of course we would really like to know why such a thing was taking place. If it wasn't real, then just respond to it, and that's the answer. And that's one of the problems I think that we have today, is there's a lot of questions with few answers. And I think if we could expose something, you've heard a lot of allegations from people here today. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. If they're real, then let's expose them. If they're not, then let's expose them. And that's why I think this is a healthy forum that we have here today, because we have started some communication.
Well, Mr. Adams, I know of no such proposal by the Attorney General to attack anyone. It sounds far-fetched to me. And if you have letters from senators, I'd like to see them.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that it sounds far-fetched, but the letters do exist.
Well, let's see them. Let us turn up to Senator Feinstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my first occasion to be able to talk with militia members. So I'm a newcomer, and I've listened very carefully to what has been said here today. And what I gather from it is that, as you put it, Mr. Johnson, people are ticked off, irritated, annoyed, upset, whatever you may say, about a variety of things having to do with, quote, government, whether it's law enforcement or decision makers or anything else. What I'd like to have each one of you answer is, assuming this is correct, do you believe there are circumstances in which you can take the law into your own hands? Mr. Tokman, let's go down.
I'm sorry, it's Truckman.
Excuse me, Mr. Truckman.
Like a vehicle. No, ma'am, I don't. Nobody should be an island unto himself, nor a law unto himself.
So you believe there are no circumstances where individuals should take the law into their own hands?
There is one. When someone comes to destroy my family, I won't have a choice. If that were ever to happen, I would defend to the last drop of blood.
Okay.
And I would expect any other American to do the same thing. And I'm told that you have a concealed weapons permit, so I guess you probably feel the same way we do.
Well, let me put that aside. I do not have a concealed weapon permit.
Well, you recently had one.
No, I had one in the 1970s. I have not had one since then. after a terrorist incident that took place involving myself. That was
have to
the
go
only
back to
time
my-
I had a concealed weapon permit, so I'm happy to set that one straight.
Well, I apologize. I'll have to go back to my California informers.
I think you will. Let me move on. Mr. Fletcher, do you believe there are any circumstances under which you or your followers can take the law into their own hands?
Commonly, absolutely not, and we do not at any time espouse that in any way, shape, or form. However, we are, and again, it's totally, as in the militia Montana, we're predominantly educational in nature, and by that I mean that's what we do mostly. You will not find us out in our camos and that type of thing very regularly at all. No, normally, and at no time have we ever espoused any such action. You know, we are, however, a defensive kind of a concept, if you will, and I suppose there could be some bizarre situation like the unconstitutional suspension of the Constitution that might therefore appear that people are going to take things.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
There is no time for any people to go against the laws of their government and to take those laws into their own hands. That is totally unacceptable in any society, and we certainly and fully agree with that. One of the questions that was brought up about this particular meeting here today was, how many people are involved with the militia? And I think some earlier testimony, that was kind of hard to put a finger on. I can personally tell you that from my office alone, we have helped establish over 1,000 lawful militia units throughout the country in all 50 states. And I know that all of these people that I've talked to and that I talk to throughout the nation agree with the statements I'm making right now, that we must be law-abiding. The only exception to that, which I believe has already been stated, is for self-preservation and self-defense of our persons and family if an unlawful act were being perpetrated against us.
All right. Mr. Johnson?
I'd say there'll only be two occasions. First one is if, once again, if you come into somebody's house, shooting.
Without a warrant and
Yeah.
without reasonable cause. Is
Yeah,
that-
without a warrant, without a reasonable cause. And it would be awfully nice if they came in the house with the warrant. It would be nice if they would knock politely. But other than that, I don't see a reason for using any kind of force to justify your actions. And of course, once again, you suspend the Constitution. Then for that reason, I don't have to recognize anybody in federal law enforcement. If we're invaded for some reason and our government's overthrown by a foreign power, we're going to have to take the law into our own hands to save it.
Okay. Mr. Olson?
I would agree completely with what J.J. Johnson has said, that there is no other reason to take law into one's own hands unless it's for the preservation of himself or the property, his family. What we have done, and this is how I deal with the law, and I recognize the law and submit to the law, we have empowered and encouraged our sheriffs. We provide the evidence. This book that I would like to present to this Senate subcommittee is about 6 pages, 6 pounds of evidence that will conclusively show this committee the corruption in government. And I would like the committee to have this book. Now you who represent this government, you who have formed this Senate body, and you who are concerned about the laws, now this is the way that I deal with it. Here's the evidence. You carry out your responsibility for the law.
Okay, may I go on and ask another question?
Yes,
And
you
let
may.
me...
To take whatever time you need, Senator Feinstein.
Oh, thank you very
Turn the
much.
lights
Mr. Olson, you're wearing a uniform, and that uniform says you are a commander. What is it that you command?
Ours is an organization of command communication. Serving in the military, we understand what is called command control communication, because there is a control that must be exercised in the organized military. We in the militia have command communication in that we convey information down to the lowest level so that reasonable, intelligent human beings can make an informed decision.
Do you command people?
No, no, I am a commander only in what is called a unity of command, so that a person reports to another person all the way up and down the chain. That's called a simple line of communication or echelon of communication. There is no command
And what
control.
do these people communicate about?
Communicate information. The information now available to the American public is extraordinary. Is extraordinary in that we are available now through alternative sources of news to convey truth to the American people. I believe that what you're seeing in America in the last 3 or 4 years is a phenomena of informed Americans now waking up. A new conscience is building in America.
I don't mean to stop you, but I've got so many questions.
Yes.
I want to ask you about
I'll try
what
to.
it is,
Forgive me, I
just
am a preacher.
practically what it is you do. Do the people in your organization stockpile weapons?
I wouldn't say stockpiling. No one should have more than they should need.
How many weapons does an individual need?
It depends upon the threat that they perceive.
So is it fair to say that there could be unlimited numbers of weapons?
Possibly. The old adage in the military is that accuracy is everything.
And what do you do with these weapons?
Prepare ourselves to defend ourselves, ma'am. We are not offensive. We are defensive, purely defensive.
So everybody is trained in how to use these weapons?
No, ma'am. In the community that we call the militia, there are two parts of the militia. That which we call the patriot body, those people that are more concerned about information, seminars, videotapes, information. And then there is the militia who may be involved in the weekend maneuvers. That is what you see in the press often. What you don't see in this vast grouping of Americans concerned about the Constitution are the religious right, for example. They're very much concerned. The patriot community, the information community, they're very much concerned. But what you do see is that small portion of people called the militia who exercise on the weekends.
And under what circumstances would this command operation that you have sanction the use of these weapons?
Excellent question, ma'am. We will defer to the lawful historic authority, which is the county sheriff. He indeed is the commander of the local militia. And when a situation erupts in which we would be deputized...
Does he participate with you?
No, he cannot because, of course, of his political nature. He cannot always, but he is normally in support of, knowing the historic role of our sheriffs. In the event that the county were to be endangered, he could deputize a ready posse, and he could form the militia to defend the people. That's what the historic militia is all about.
And what would this county be afraid of?
The county could be afraid of, for example, there are 53 federal agencies right now that employ deadly force. They carry weapons and they can make arrests using deadly force.
But supposing they had warrants?
That may not necessarily be what the county would be with best interest of the people in the county. For example, our county sheriff does not know when federal officials come into the county to search, seize, or arrest until he sees it on the nightly news. We have a bill before our House, or we're trying to seek support for it. Perhaps you've heard of it, the No More Wacos bill, or the sheriff empowerment legislation, which would require federal agencies to get permission from the local county sheriffs before they could come into the county. In other words, coordinate their activities with the county sheriff. There are, of course, some exceptions to that rule, which would involve necessarily the investigation of the sheriff himself, for example.
I believe my time is up, Mr. Chairman. I'll wait for the next round.
Senator Feinstein, I don't think we're going to have another round because the vote starts in a few minutes. If you want to
Could I
take
ask
a
one
few
other
more minutes.
question?
Yes.
Do you believe there are any circumstances in which an individual has a right to blow up a building? And let's start with you, Mr. Truckman.
Absolutely not, Mrs. Feinstein. Absolutely not. We are plain and simple a neighborhood watch, watching out for problems. When we encounter what we perceive as threats to a peaceful society, we do something about it.
Well,
We
let me
alert
ask
the
you
proper
this. If you're
officials.
plain and simple, why do I read constantly
That's the
these
problem.
violent quotes, this hatred for other people, this anti-Semitic, anti-black, driving people to have this intense fear and antagonism?
Would you like my black friend to answer that for you? I'm sick and tired. Wait a minute.
No.
I'm sick and tired of these questions constantly.
I asked you, why?
We have gone over it and over it and over it, and if you want to blame somebody about it, take a look at the press. We're telling them one thing, they're telling you something else. I already addressed
So
it.
you're saying you don't say these things?
No, ma'am, I do not say that.
Okay.
We're all in this
That's all
together.
I wanted to know. So all those comments are wrong.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Feinstein, what we're saying is we are all in this together. America better put away its differences or we'll cease to have a country. We shouldn't be your side and my side. We should all be for the same, the betterment of our country and for our fellow countrymen. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Fletcher?
Well, it's pretty much the
circumstances on which...
The same answer. No, absolutely
All right.
not. And I don't mean that your question's ludicrous, but that it is a little bit, and I don't mean that as an insult. I don't think anybody could perceive that point in time where that would make sense, particularly if we're talking the housing of infants and that type of thing. And the press, which Mr. Trockman refers to, shows Mr. Trockman's face and one of the other Patriot leaders' face and the blown-up babies, and then just leaves it hang there. And that's, unfortunately, we can't sue for that. And if we could, it would look like the national debt in terms of a legal action. And as far as the racial thing is concerned, that's garbage. Those folks in the extreme radical fringes of the Patriot movement, which is a cross-section of Americana, same as the police forces, 10% of every police force is either racially motivated, racist persons. They're doing drugs, doing prostitution, or stealing on the side. And it's probably the same in the militia movement because it's a cross-section of Americana. We stand down from any hate kind of rhetoric whatsoever, period. And my wife of 25 years was Jewish and Italian. My business partners for 4 or 5 different years were blacks. And my granddaughter is half American Indian. So if I'm racist, I am doing a lousy job of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Adams?
We certainly in no way would ever condone, as I said earlier, any type of violence, and of course that would include a bombing. I would ask each of you that as you watch the media report upon us, and you've probably seen many of our faces many times, listen for those words of racism from our mouth. You have not heard it. You will not hear it. And if we hear of anyone in our organization speaking of hate or speaking of racism, they will be asked to leave and never return because we do not condone it. The press will go out and find some fringe element out there that may say something, but trust me and believe me, it is not part of our mainstream organization. And as I said earlier, there are going to be some people that will try to ride our coattails because we are before the press. My gosh, we're before you today. And that's a lot of public knowledge. And they're going to try to grab some of that, and we will try to eliminate it wherever we can. But you pay very close attention to what the media has to say. And certainly as politicians, you've been soundbited. You know exactly what we're talking about. But you watch what we say out of our own mouth, and that's what's true.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, first it's a question about blowing up a building.
Are there any circumstances under which an individual is justified to blow up any building?
After you've evacuated it and you wanted to cover up the evidence. Other than that, let me talk about the racist aspect now. It's getting old. I'm getting real tired of being called a Klan member. I'm getting tired of being called a member of the Aryan Nations group. I spoke 2 weeks ago down to Lincoln Memorial along with 2 other black people and the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms, and I believe there was somebody else Jewish who helped organize it, and the reports came out that a racist, anti-Semitic militia group held a rally on the Lincoln Memorial. Are these people blind, or is there an agenda afoot here? Okay? There are more black people showing up every day. A lot of the things that these people sit around in these meetings, these so-called right-wing wackos, and talk about, happen daily in black communities. And black communities know this. The first people concerned seriously about neighborhood house-to-house searches and seizures were over in Chicago. They were black. Good grief, almost half the people in Waco who got killed were black. This movement isn't about guns and skin color. It's about liberty. It's about freedom. Amen. The same kind of legislation we're seeing coming down on everybody now came down on blacks just after the Civil War. That's why they're getting involved in this thing. And it's going to come eventually to somebody, you know, as you keep ignoring us and saying, well, these guys are just a bunch of angry white men. Well,
pardon me for interrupting, but they have started the vote now, so we're going to have to conclude in just a few minutes.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Olson, would you respond to that?
The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Our record stands for itself. The FBI will give you all the evidence concerning the Michigan Militia Corps on that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, the vote has started, so we're going to have to conclude very shortly. There have been a lot of very serious charges made, and we would like a specification to the extent that you gentlemen would like to make them. I would ask you, Mr. Fletcher, when you talk about other explosions in the federal building and another John Doe, to give us the specifics. You've given us some materials. We will take a look at them. Mr. Olson, you have made a charge that what Senator Cole pointed up about a picture of Adolf Hitler, all in favor of gun control, raise your right hand, being Jewish copyrighted.
That is from the Jews for the Preservation of Firearm Gun Ownership out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that is a copyrighted document.
And what's your authority that it's Jewish?
A letter that was came out in JPFO's newsletter about a month ago, and I'll be glad to give you a copy.
From whom?
From the director of JPFO.
Would you please submit a copy?
We want to have it on your desk
it.
within the week, sir.
I'd be glad to get into the issue you raised about the single bullet theory. If you want to write to me, I will respond to you in detail. I'm sorry we don't have the time with the vote starting. Mr. Adams, you have made a comment about the organization of militias in all 50 states, and I would ask this of you and of all the other members present, if you would provide this committee in writing all the information you have about where the militias are, how many there are in each state, where their names are, what their membership is, what their purposes are, if there is anything in writing about them, if there is to give us some specification to the extent you can as to what weapons they have. And I'm not making any suggestion if there are any violations of law, but we'd like to know as much specifically as we can about this question. This hearing, I think, has been illuminating.
Perhaps you'll allow Ken Adams to give you a response to that question if he will provide you with that in-depth information.
I certainly would be appreciative if Mr. Ken Adams would do that. My own view, as I suggested in a brief exchange with Mr. Olson, is that let it all come out. Let it all hang out. Let's
Could I respond to your question, sir? To your request, it'd be brief.
If you can, briefly, the votes have started.
You have asked for lists of people and lists of memberships and things of this information. I cannot provide that.
No, I haven't asked for a list of membership or lists of people. Okay. I'm not asking for that. Okay. I'm asking for total numbers. This committee would like to make an assessment.
I will do the best
as to what the strength of the militias' strengths are.
I will provide everything that I possibly can to you that would not violate personal privacy.
We're not asking you for any individual names that you don't want to provide. We're not asking you for violations of any personal privacy.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Ms. Trockman, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, sir. I can add that we will provide you with the numbers of the people that we work with in leadership across the country, concerned citizens, and it will stagger your imagination, I guarantee you. America is upset, and we are a valve to help control them till we can find a way to solve this. Please be thankful that we are here. We love our country. We love our form of government. There is no better on earth. We're here to support the righteous government.
I would like an answer from each of you, too, in writing, if you'd provide it. As a follow-up to Mr. Johnson said, that there's only time between now and armed conflict. You have all said that you respect the democratic process and the ballot box as a way of changing our institutions. And the only limitations when asked about violence was essentially a statement about self-defense. To the extent that you know of any others who disagree and do plan violence, to the extent you would provide that to this committee, we would be interested to know that. This is the first hearing that we have on this subject, and we will be pursuing the matter further. You have something more you want to say, Mr. Trockman?
Sir, we are already doing that with federal agencies.
That's correct, yes. We have provided...
Well, all right. Provide them to federal agencies is fine. If you provide them to this subcommittee, we are interested to know, too, because we're trying to make an assessment of the extent of the militias, how many people, not necessarily specific an entity, what their firepower is, what their purposes are, and whether they pose any threat, and whether there's any justification for further legislation on the subject, either at the state, local, or at the federal level. But this is the first hearing. This is the fourth hearing which this subcommittee has held on problems of terrorism generally.
Can I make one real brief statement? Given the very brief.
Make it real.
Okay. I can assure you, sir, and to all members of Congress and to all the people of this nation, that the militia does not constitute any threat to this nation.
Well, we have that assurance, Mr. Adams, but you'll forgive us if we don't want to accept it at face value. We want to look further.
Mr. Specter, if please, I wonder if we may be able to have an insurance that we would have an open door to get to you folks relative to the same fear that we have relative to a government that maybe the people are no longer trusting.
You have an open door to this subcommittee. Any additional information you wish to provide to us, we would be glad to have.
Thank you, sir.
Let me make one brief comment about a press advisory which I have just seen from Congressman Schumer commenting about these hearings. There will be follow-up, and we'd be glad to have any suggestions that Mr. Schumer, Congressman Schumer, might have. And note that we had testimony from Rabbi Heyer, the dean and founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, earlier in our hearings on terrorism, and a concluding statement that at least my own view is that a public airing of grievances that the citizens have is a very useful and very healthy thing. There is in the Constitution, beyond the more frequently quoted freedom of speech, religion, and press, the right of the citizenry to petition the Congress. And we are interested in what you have to say. Much of it you've already heard is there's disagreement with the panel, and I would express that same disagreement. And my own view is whatever ideas you have, let's get them out in the open. And I believe that, if I may say just one or two words in a conclusory fashion, that much of what has been said here today will fall of its own weight. But let's hear about it. And I think if we hear you out, we may decrease your membership. But it's a free society. We all have a right to speak, and let the American people draw their conclusions. And my own sense is that it is healthy, and America will applaud letting you speak your piece, no matter how much we disagree with you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The Senate passed the anti-terrorism bill last week, 91-8. The House will take up the anti-terrorism bill in July.